Welcome to today's video where we're going to learn how to solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by completing the square. We're going to use a brand new method called completing the square, and you on the other side of this video are probably saying to me right now, don't teach me another method. You already taught me how to solve a quadratic like this by factoring it out. And you're right, I did. I taught you how to do that. But the problem with this one is if we were to go about that, how I taught in the past by factoring, you're not going to be able to solve it. I'll show you why. Let's take our C value, 16, write it over here. This is how we've done it in the past. And when we've listed out our factors, we said what two numbers will multiply together to make 16, but add together to make negative 14. So since the b is a negative, they have to both be negative values. So negative 1 times negative 16, negative 2 times negative 8, and negative 4 times negative 4. That's my list of factors. Well, when I add these together, I get negative 17. When I add these together, I get negative 10. And when I add those together, I get a negative 8. None of which are my b value of negative 14. So we have an issue. We're not able to solve through factoring. A lot of quadratics are going to be like this, where you go to use this factoring method and it's not going to work. All right, so what you need to stop and ask yourself is, do I remember how to complete the square? And hopefully through watching this video, you will be able to do that. So let's begin. Step one in completing the square, when we have the C value over here and it's not a perfect square trinomial, we need to move that C value over to the other side. We need to get that over there and replace the C value with something that will create a perfect square trinomial here. So I'm going to say minus 16 minus 16. I now have x squared minus 14x equals negative 16. I need a new C value here. I need whatever goes right there to make this a perfect square trinomial. Because once I turn it into a perfect square trinomial, I can then break it down, factor it out to that binomial squared. All right, so here we go. What C value? How do I find that? I'm going to take b. Remember from my previous video, b divided by 2, and then we want to square it. That will tell us what our C value needs to be to make this a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to take negative 14 divided by 2, and then I'm going to square it. Negative 14 divided by 2 just gives me negative 7, and negative 7 times itself becomes 49, positive 49. Keep that in mind. So I take 49 and I'm going to put it right there. Now, if I just randomly take a number and put it right there, in algebra, if I put it on one side, I have to put it on the other side to keep everything equal. So now I have x squared minus 14x plus 49. Oops, I missed my x there. 14x plus 49 equals negative 16. Keep in mind, this is where most students will make the mistake, plus 49. I have to put that over there as well. If I just randomly plug 49 in there, I got to put the 49 in on the other side if I want to keep everything equal. Okay, now why did I do this? Because now this is a perfect square trinomial. We can break this down into a binomial by asking ourselves, what number times itself makes 49? And that is a 7. So I'm going to say x minus 7, and we can just say that binomial squared. Why I said negative 7 is because the b value was a negative. So if you think about that, x minus 7 times x minus 7, it's going to turn into this when you multiply those two binomials out. So we factored this down because what we created was a perfect square trinomial. Now I'm going to say this is equal to negative 16 plus 49, which is 33. And I can now solve. I have a binomial being squared equal to a number. I'm going to square root this to get rid of the exponent of 2. If I square root the left side, I need to square root the right side. I now have x minus 7 equals the positive and the negative value of the square root of 33. Now, it's not always going to be a nice, neat number here. Sometimes it's nasty. All right, square root of 33 is not a whole number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use this calculator and I'm going to punch that in. I say the square root of 33, and what I get is x minus 7 is going to equal either positive or negative 5.7 4. Now, if you're looking at your calculator after punching this in, it's actually 5.744562. That's way too much information. Just break it up, okay? Round it off to the nearest hundredth. Nearest hundredth is your go-to, okay? If it's not clear in the instructions on how far they want it rounded out, go with your nearest hundredth, all right? So here I have this information, and I need to write out two equations, a positive 5.74 and a negative 5.74, and solve for both of them. So I'm going to say x minus 7 equals 5.74, and I'm going to say x minus 7 equals negative 5.74. When I solve both of these, I will have my two solutions to this quadratic. My first one, okay, I'm going to add 7, cancels. I'm going to add 7, and I'm going to get x equals 12.74. That's my first solution. Here I'm going to add 7, cancels, add 7 to negative 5.74, and I'm going to get x equals 1.26. And I now have my two solutions to this quadratic. These are the 2 points in which my parabola will cross the x-axis. I can list them out as coordinates, 12.740 and 1.260. And there is my answer. Okay, I know I went through this fairly fast, but you can always slow the video down, pause it when you get to something that doesn't make 100% sense. Big important thing for you is watch my two previous videos on this, because in my previous video, this was already moved over. That's the only difference here, is we had to move this c over before we put in a new c value that created a perfect square trinomial. And then in the video before that, I showed you what this did. This just gets us that c value that creates a perfect square trinomial. All right, so hopefully this all makes sense. Study hard, work hard, practice these types of problems. Sometimes they'll come out really nasty like this. Other times you might get 25 there, and when you go to square root it, square root of 25 is just a 5. Those ones are really nice because they're super easy. You don't have to go through working with decimals as much. But if you got decimals, grab that calculator. That's what that tool is for. All right? Study hard. Good luck on your upcoming test.